Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Maria Luisa Boyce. Welcome to our UPS working session, Applying a Gender Lens to a COVID-19 Economic Recovery. I am so excited and humbled to be here with you today. And we very much understand that it's Friday and it's near the weekend for some already the weekend. So we are going to make this discussion an important discussion. And something that I wanted to start before I introduce the wonderful panelists that I'm joined with today is that from a UPS perspective, supporting women entrepreneurs is something that we are committed to, that we have been doing now for several years, and that we have learned that we do it thanks to a partnership and working together and a commitment to have an inclusive trade, to be able to believe that if you enable women entrepreneurs, the sky is the limit, and there's different things that can be done. And so, as we have heard this week, different topics about what are the challenges that are facing different aspects, right? Small MSMEs, women entrepreneurs, traders, the different discussions that we have had. I think we have seen different statistics and numbers that bring to front the importance of why having this discussion, right? Why are we talking about applying a gender lens to a COVID-19 economic recovery? And how do we look at part of the population? And on that piece, we have some of the statistics that you have seen and probably you have heard in different instances this week. But let's put into context on our discussion the necessity to have women participate as part of an economic recovery, just by nature of the amount of population they represent around the globe, just by nature of what is needed after in this crisis and after this crisis that we're going through with the pandemic. And look at some of the numbers that I always find fascinating. Healthcare workers and first responders, the majority, 70% of them are women. And that is amazing, right? Especially we started seeing it, and I can tell you from a UPS perspective, we started seeing more women becoming entrepreneurs because they had to work from home. They had to take care of their elders, their family, or they lost their jobs because they were in service industry. This is something that is very important. 40% of countries have laws that restrict women's participation in the labor force one way or another. And then that's something that we need to be aware of as we think about an economic recovery. The number that I always find fascinating too is that 55% of women are employed in the service sector worldwide. And that is tourism, right? And what was the biggest hit, the biggest sector impacted during COVID? Tourism and the travel. This impacted many families and many businesses. And so the last item, the last statistic before I go to the real presenters here and our panelists is something that is very important to keep in mind, and that is we always hear about the informal and the formal economy. 80% of South African formal economy are represented, women are in 80% of the informal economy, 74% of the sub-Saharan Africa, and 54% of Latin America and the Caribbean are women in the informal economy. And that is something that, as we're going to talk about training and capacity building, all that, why is that, right? How have we lost the trust of our fellow women to be part of the economy? Or how do we invite them and give them that empowerment to be part of the economy? So I know I can go with more statistics, but I really want to use the time with the panelists, and you have all their bios. I'm going to make a very personal introduction to them. We have here, and I'm going to go in no specific order. We have Anna Celeski Mori, Head of Partnerships and Program Officer of ITC She Trades. My personal introduction about Anna, you can read her bio. She cares, and that's going to be consistent with all of them. She believes in finding a practical solution to problems. That has been my read of Anna in the a few years, 5 years now that we know each other. Rahama Wright, founder and CEO of Shea Jelin. Rahama's personal introduction for me is she empowers and she's resilient. And those are the two words, Rahama, that I read for you. And you care to, but I love your passion and how you're making a living out of it, right? Because we do want to empower women to have that living. And also that you continue to grow. Then we have Marcela Otero, head of the Inclusive Trade Department at the Undersecretary of International Economic Relations, SUBREI in Chile. Marcela, my word for you is that you are thoughtful and tenacious. You have continued through your career, continue to advocate for policies that make a difference. And we are very grateful to have you here and using your voice to make changes internationally from representing your country. And I think that is amazing, Marcela. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, my dear Salma Al-Rashid, who is the Chief Advocacy Officer of Al-Nahat Society. I hope I pronounced it correctly, Salma, I know, on that piece. And my description for Salma is that she is empathetic, she's tenacious, and she is one of the individuals that I have met in my life that understands strategy and not giving up. And I really, Salma, we're very honored to have you with us, and thank you for joining all of us this afternoon. I hope my personal introduction made sense, because that's what I have learned from all of you. And today we're going to talk about the challenges that you're all facing. And I hope that also we're going to highlight what are the opportunities, right? And what are we seeing that is happening? And the first question that we wanted to start sharing with the group, and I'm going to stop here the share so we can have the conversation, is tell us about, in your own world, tell us a little bit about your world, the work that you do, because you work all in empowering women entrepreneurs one way or another directly. How did COVID-19 impact you, and what did you have to do to adapt? And I'm going to go first to Ana. Ana, welcome, bienvenida.
Thank you so much, Maria. Power of nature and of entrepreneurship. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, dearest panelists and everyone tuning in today. Big thanks to UPS for bringing us together. Well, more than a year, right, has passed since the outbreak of COVID, and even today, governments, institutions, me, yourselves, you're still learning how to best manage this crisis while staying sane and hopeful for the future. It wasn't a piece of cake. It was a juggler's job. Here at ITC, the International Trade Center, we had to look into ourselves while adapting our services to continue delivering quality support to our networks of women entrepreneurs. And we are a technical agency of the United Nations and of the World Trade Organization. So working directly in the most vulnerable geographies, helping small producers, SMEs to increase economic opportunities, and policymakers to basically improve their policies for a more just society. So instead of booking flights, organizing workshops, we switched to enhance our remote platforms. We were quite lucky because we already had a very strong online platform called shetrades.com with a strong virtual learning community, but we also needed to understand the realities on the ground. Each country, Vietnam, Nigeria, Zambia, they had different realities during the pandemic. So our country teams were feeding updates to headquarters, which also included how our staff were doing in terms of welfare. So at ITC SheTrades, we also became increasingly reliant on business support organizations, national chambers of commerce that actually continue providing hands-on in-country support to meet the needs of women entrepreneurs in capacity building in services. Instead of, I like to say that instead of annual review meetings, we passed to quarterly review meetings and then to monthly review meetings just to help us identify risks. And all of this was easy. It was easy. I think what's really the problem was what you said, Maria, is that this crisis, like other crises, was not gender neutral. So women has been affected, be it as nurses, caregivers, or workers overrepresented in sectors such as tourism, hospitality, and so on, and as business owners with fewer assets to cushion the pandemic-induced liquidity shortages and so on. So back in March 2020, and I'm sure you remember as well, we realized the huge impact of COVID on women, and we began working on this strong contingency plan to support thousands of women entrepreneurs in our networks. We partner with UPS, we partner with various capital providers, with Visa, to really provide a practical guide and escort them through the recovery path. So we explained to them the impact of COVID on trade, on how SMEs should account for COVID in financial business planning, how to implement crisis management approaches, how to address changes in consumer behavior due to the pandemic. I really doubt that there is one person in the session today that did not increase online purchasing in the past 18 months. So this is huge, right? And of course, as part of our efforts, we teamed up with ICC, with W20, with Salma, with Maria Luisa, UPS, and we put together an action plan called Build Back Better, putting women at the heart of the recovery plan with some key recommendations. That includes, number one, for corporations. Corporations need to strengthen efforts to diversify supply chains, improve financing flexibility and access for women entrepreneurs. Governments, now is the right timing, if you did not start yet, to start increasing women's participation in public procurement opportunities. And for the international community, it's partnerships, and partnerships. We need to support digital literacy and use of digital technologies so these women can continue being competitive, right? So of course, beyond that, we support with crisis management training, and we put capital providers to also facilitate access to finance for women entrepreneurs. And I do think, as people like to say, we need to be in the right side of history. We need to, take this moment as an opportunity to think about a more equitable trade. So it's time to invest in the private sector. It's time to provide also growth capital to women-led businesses. Maria, thank you.
Anna, thank you so much. So I heard you, and I heard four words that I think can describe what you just told us. One, let's see if I do it right. One is technology. Was something that you really had to leverage and adapt, and we partner with you on that as part of what we did. The second one was planning, right? It is important to have a plan of action of how can you structure that piece. And then resilience, that's the other word. If I have learned anything in my experience working with women entrepreneurs, is that they're resilient, and that's important. And the last one is community. It takes a partnership, right? It cannot be done alone. I really appreciate you giving us in 4 minutes that quick overview of how the pandemic. One statistic to share with the participants, in that we saw, Anna, to your point about selling online, we saw in 9 months, we as a company, we move on a daily basis 3% of the world's GDP in our network. So we have an insight of that movement, right? And that capacity. We saw changes in 9 months in e-commerce that we thought were going to take 5 to 10 years. That's huge, that's fast. And I think that brings me to our next speaker, that is Rahama Wright, our small business owner. Rahama, are you consider a small business? Maybe medium size now. You have grown, but tell us, how did COVID-19 impact you, my dear Rahama? And tell us about your story. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Maria Luisa, for inviting me. I've been really excited to join this conversation. I'm definitely a small business. I think the SBA defines a small business as a company that has 500 or less employees. So I still have quite a ways to go. But hi, everyone. My name is Rahama Wright. I'm the founder of Shea Aline, a DC-based social impact company I started after serving in the Peace Corps. And so what my company does is, to what Mary Luisa was sharing earlier about the informal market in Africa and the continent, I work in the informal market, really focused on women and figuring out how to help women who are primarily in rural communities in Northern Ghana access the tools and the resources to create value-added products that we then bring to the US marketplace. And so I'll illustrate that really quickly. So the women that we work with produce a product called shea butter, and it comes from the seed of the shea fruit. So this is the raw material that they use, and they create a skincare ingredient that we then develop into soaps, creams, moisturizers. And we follow the entire value and supply chain from sourcing the fruit all the way to making our products and connecting that product to a customer. Here in the US, we work with Whole Foods, MGM Resorts. Our latest retail partner is Macy's. And the whole idea is helping to integrate women who historically have been in the informal market and figuring out how to provide them the tools and the resources so that they can benefit from the formal market and benefit from a trade of a product that comes directly out of their communities. And as someone who is in the consumer packaged goods industry, who's creating products and bringing that product to market, 100% COVID-19 has impacted my business in a very huge way. Immediately, in March of 2020, as Anna was talking about, it was kind of a ripple effect. Almost overnight, I lost 70% of my revenue because we were doing most of our sales through face-to-face interactions. So for example, MGM used our products in their spa. And so they're, putting them in like pedicures, manicures, massages, etc. And they shut down. Their spa shut down. We are in Washington, DC. And so because of mandatory shelter in place, a lot of some of the retail pop-ups we were doing throughout the city also shut down. We had retail at the airport due to travel bans. All of that also shut down. So almost overnight, it was like this ripple effect that came through my business. And I had to take a huge step back and realize that in order for us to survive, in order for us to get through this very difficult period, we had to look at digital and we had to look at online. And so some of the things that we did immediately was, one, so much revenue was being lost. So I applied for programs, so like the PPP program. I applied to grants. I, reached out to some of my suppliers to see if we could negotiate payment terms. There were so many different things to just address the revenue loss. And then I started looking and shifting to digital. We changed our e-commerce platform from a WooCommerce platform to Shopify. I started looking at different ways for us to do fulfillment. And I'm super happy to share that we use UPS for our fulfillment services through the UPS e-fulfillment service. And that was through, working with Mary Louisa and her colleagues to help us address that kind of gap in our own supply chain. And I will say, if we're really thinking about how do we build back better for women, particularly women in sub-Saharan Africa, for me, what I've noticed is that on the supply side, on our shea producer side and the cooperative side, because of, closures, Ghana was closed for almost 4 months. It was really hard to support our communities. We do have an in-country team, but there was restrictions around movement. And so people had to stay at home. We had to close our facilities. So our processing centers and our facilities had to shut down temporarily. And if you all remember, in the early days of COVID, there was a lot of uncertainty around how this disease spread. There was a lot of uncertainty just around how people could protect themselves and take care of themselves. And so we had to figure out how to support our cooperative members from a distance and get them access to testing, which was really difficult to do. We were finding that people who were going to clinics were actually being diagnosed with pneumonia. And so, really figuring out whether it's COVID, whether it's the flu, whether it was pneumonia, it was really difficult to really figure out, how to people in terms of health, giving them access to health services and making sure that people were safe. And I will say, one of the things that has been really critical to our recovery, and Anna, Mary Louisa, you both kind of signal to this, is partnerships. if we're able to overcome a lot of the challenges and issues, it really is through developing and investing in strategic partners who can help us with our distribution, who can help us with, you know, our manufacturing and our production, and also help us with the financing. And I couldn't agree more. Invest in growth capital in women-owned businesses. I mean, we should shout that from the mountaintops. But I will stop here because I know we'll go into more Q&A.
Oh, Rahama, I love it. So resilience, tenacity, and I'm gonna use an overused word, pivoting, right? You had to do it, and you made it. I love, you're here smiling to us after going through losing 70% of your revenue and turning it around. That is resilience. Thank you, my dear Rahama. So let me move to Marcela. Marcela Otero. Marcela, bienvenida, welcome. How from where you are in your position in Chile that you can share with us how forward you are, how did COVID impacted the work that you were doing? Bienvenida, welcome.
Thank you very much, Maria Luisa. I'm very happy to be here. I would like to thank you, PS, for inviting me to take part of this working session. And I would also like to greet my fellow panelists, Dana, Rahama, and Salma. Yes, well, as we all know, women have been the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. And in the case of Chile, the COVID-19 erased 10 years of progress in incorporating women to the workforce. Moreover, according to a survey led by our Ministry of Women and Gender Equality and UN Women on the gendered impacts of the pandemic in Chile, as a result of the crisis, 1 in 3 women indicated that their income is insufficient and that they have a specific or great difficulties to sustain their livelihoods. Also, as it is the case in several countries, and it has been mentioned already, women's time dedicated to care and domestic chores has increased. In all activities related to housework and care, women report an increase in time spent more than men do. In this regard, our Ministry of Finance, together with the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality, have made an outstanding effort in mainstreaming a gender perspective throughout national recovery plans, aiming for support programs and initiatives, including unemployment subsidies and emergency cash transfers that benefit women, and especially female heads of households. Likewise, it was created a Women COVID Council, in Spanish, Consejo Mujer COVID, that brought together women from different sectors to develop a short and medium-term proposal to face the crisis, incorporating gender lens in 3 key areas. 1, protection, focused on violence against women and access to health. 2nd, economic recovery. And 3rd, care economy. Additionally, we are quite aware that we need more embedded data. Gender statistics provide an evidence base for developing and monitoring policies and programs to reduce several barriers that women face to fully participate in international trade, as we all know. So in this sense, last year in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, during Chile's presidency of the Pacific Alliance Forum, if you don't know, Pacific Alliance is a regional forum composed by Chile, Colombia, Peru, and Mexico. At that time, we prepared together with the Inter-American Development Bank a study that measures the impact that COVID crisis has had on women-led export business in Colombia, Chile, Mexico, and Peru. And I'm listening to Rahama, and it's very similar. This paper results reflect the effect of the pandemic has had in the women-owned companies in the region. The report includes several recommendations for the design of tools and policies that support reactivation of female-led businesses in the Pacific Alliance. So from our sector, Maria Luisa, from what we are working from the government, we strongly believe that strengthening inclusivity is key. And this is why we must stimulate healthier labor markets and keep advancing equality. Every step takes us forward in the moment, and the momentum keeps building in these challenging times. So I don't want to take more time because there are more questions.
Marcela, thank you so much. So fascinating. I love two words, and I know I'm eating out of the time, but I love what you're talking about, and I love you're using the word of inclusivity in a way, in a very practical way of inclusivity, not just for saying it, but creating a women COVID council. I think that's fascinating, right? From a policy recommendation, and I will go and use this word that I used to introduce you, tenacity, because I know it takes a lot of work. Thank you so much, Marcela. And now we move to my dear Salma, who let me put a context, Salma, on this. You were the Sherpa for W20, ready to do all the plans, right? You have amazing plans ahead. And then COVID happens. How did that impact you, and in everything else that you were seeing in your world? Welcome, my dear Salma.
Thank you, Maria Luisa, and it's such a pleasure to be among a great lineup of panelists, Rahama, Anna, and Marcela. And thank you to UPS for the invitation and for UPS's continued partnership with whether Women 20 or An-Nahda. So thank you very much for having me. So I wear multiple hats. The first hat is as the Chief Advocacy Officer at a local non-government organization out of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. The second hat is the Head of Delegation for Saudi Arabia to the Women 20, an independent non-government policy recommendation group within the G20 system. And as you said, Maria Luisa, I was the Women 20 Sherpa last year under the Saudi presidency. And exactly, you summarized it. You know, I was listening to Anna, Marcela, and Rahama talk about March, the infamous March 2020. I think our world is either before March 2020 or after March 2020. And as you said, we had big plans. I had a full schedule of traveling the world, being different places, different engagements, having people come over to Saudi or us traveling the world. And then suddenly, I had to be in a room in my house, and luckily for technology, we were able to stay connected with the world. So we had to, what you used the word that's been overused, we had to pivot, we had to adjust, and immediately from the beginning, working with UPS, working with ITC last year, and we're really proud of that partnership. We really wanted to understand quickly and immediately the impact of this pandemic on women. We knew as the W20 delegates, which is about 100 delegates from across the G20 member states or members, what is the impact on women? We know, like you said, that the large percentage of those who work in the service or the sectors, and I don't want to repeat what's been said by my fellow panelists, but a large percentage of these sectors are made up of women. We know women carry the brunt of the care work, whether it's for the children or the elderly, and we had plans. So what do? We had to really adjust very quickly we're a policy, as Women 20 is a policy recommendation group or engagement group. So what are the policies, the policy recommendations that we want to put forward to the G20 leaders that will address this pressing challenge, while knowing that there are a lot of, we started the pandemic, or women started the pandemic at a disadvantage. We already knew that there were a lot of disparities, there were a lot of inequalities, even before going into the pandemic. Pandemic came and really just laid bare these inequalities. So what do? And we had to work together with our delegates, with our knowledge partners, with the experts to come together and put forward for the first time a communique or a set of recommendations that we delivered to the G20 leaders in October of 2020 that has, for the first time, two sets of recommendations. The first one underscores the key measures required to expedite the economic recovery from the pandemic. And then the second one, recognizing that we know we were carrying over a lot of issues from many years before. So the second set of recommendation was, the point was to help the G20 achieve the UN Sustainable Development Agenda, the SDGs, and the objective of a strong, sustainable, and balanced growth, and by supporting women's social and economic empowerment. And these Key measures range from many that were already mentioned by fellow panelists, whether it's gender responsive budgeting, increasing investment in social infrastructure, affordable childcare, women in the informal economy, the social and income protection mechanisms that take into account women in the informal economy, partnerships, the public-private partnerships, women's access to digital technology. A lot of what's been mentioned were among the 10 recommendations that we had to expedite that recovery. And on the local level or the national level in Saudi is similar to what Rahama mentioned. I think it's interesting that the world over, it's the first time that the world collectively goes through similar disruptions of the way we do things. But I'd like to reiterate what's already been mentioned, the importance of technology, connectivity, data. Marcela mentioned the importance of sex-aggregated data, understanding to build better policies. So I'll stop there and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Salma. Thank you so much. And I think something as I'm listening to you, I love for us to think about, and you and Marcela and Anna in a way are in this world where having it in writing and words do matter, right? Does matter. You need to have the policies, the planning. I'm in the business world, and we at UPS, we move by time, and so we want things to move fast and keep moving. And sometimes I do what I tell my kids not to do. I roll my eyes and say, do we need more data? Can we just do like we know is this, but it's important, right? It's important to build that part. So let's move to our next question. Because and Salma, my two words: leadership and consistency and foresight. That's what I got from you on what you had to do during COVID, right? And all of us had to deal with resilience and managing it. And our second question, building from this, right? So we had the COVID situation. Salma said something very important. We already were facing things, right, beforehand. And then afterwards, we are doing, but we're also finding solutions, because we cannot just continue to think, oh my gosh, it's all bad, right? The statistics, the numbers. So share, and I go, Anna, back to you on first, from your perspective, what are the challenges that SMBs are facing? I think we have mentioned some of them, and women-owned businesses. What are they facing from your perspective, the program that you amazingly run with all your colleagues, and what opportunities exist? What have you seen that at night you say, oh my gosh, we made it, we changed one life?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Very, very exciting discussions. My brain is just going on and on, but like, small businesses, I think they and those in the most affected sectors, they still need market information about the shifting dynamics in demand and supply chains. And UPS has such precious data. And I thank you for sharing with us in so many workshops. They need, advice on how to retool existing capabilities and cash flow management, and farmers, for instance, in countries, because the realities are so different, from the US to Zambia to, Vietnam, but in countries where the recovery phase is still not picking up, they could diversify from a non-essential cash crop to subsistence crops that can actually be sold at the domestic market level and contribute to food security. And you know that at ITC Trades, we are always serving, the women entrepreneurs to understand their needs, and is more specifically to investigate right now the impact of COVID in their lives. And they still saying the same three things that are high risk items for them: cash flow, customers, suppliers. Just like what Rahama said, 42% of the surveyed businesses, they reduced employment. So to your question, Maria, the opportunities, they do exist, and I can highlight three of these main business needs identify. So the first one is cash flow. So those financiers in the crowd, trade financiers, impact investors, commercial banks, we know that, facilitating access to finance that is compatible to the women needs, not only bank loans, but guarantee schemes as well, super important. Number two, we all already spoke about digital marketing, e-commerce, but not only helping the women on finding, what are the best marketplaces for their products and their countries, but okay, do you understand digital payments? Do you feel safe about it? How much do you know about cybersecurity? So we are partnering with Safaricom, we are partnering with Microsoft on these areas. And number three, sustainability. I think during the pandemic, sustainability became even a more popular word for us, and making sure that businesses adopt sustainable practices that can open new markets, market opportunities is very important. And we cannot leave these SMEs and women entrepreneurs from developing countries, behind in this, new green economy also that we are talking about. So in this regard, I think I take heart in sharing that the She Trades initiative, we have that goal of connecting 3 million women to markets by 2021, but we are trying to do our share, and quite similar to what Rahama was mentioning also in one of our women entrepreneurs in our network, also in the shea sector. We helped her to shift production. So instead of producing aloe vera and shea for food, she changed to producing soap products, and then her sales growth highly because of the demand. We also connected her to e-commerce platforms. She increased and got more than $150,000 in sales. I don't need to repeat what we already said about this digital transformation, but as a United Nations agency, we are investing a lot right now in building a robust shetrades.com platform, which is a public good, free of charge, where right now more than 40,000 users can network with women entrepreneurs, can engage with buyers, with investors. Women can access online courses, webinars delivered by UPS, Seedly, eBay. They can sign up to attend international trade fairs, virtual international trade fairs that we are also organizing. If you go there, there are more than 150 topics, online courses ranging from how to fundraise your business, how to build export strategy, how to improve packaging and labeling, and UPS supported us with that as well. And women find a safe place to talk with tutors of these courses, to talk to their peers, and to get United Nations certificates, because not all businesses and women entrepreneurs have this amazing knowledge and information that Rahama has, so many of them, they still need, this content. So we are there to support them on this front. And also what we do not want in the future is to see, again, women as receivers of technology, of users of technology. We want them to be the creators as well. So we are undergoing a lot of mentoring on artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data with our tech women entrepreneurs, with Microsoft, for example, another example of partnership. So I just end, again, I will go on the importance of the partnership. So I stop here. Thanks.
Anna, I love it. I love it. And because opportunities are there, right? I think one of the challenges, how do we connect to the women to invite them and give them the empowerment of believing they can do it, and two, go and run for it. Once they have that inside, the sky is the limit. Thank you for all the work that you and your team do, because it's amazing. Rahama, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, no, thank you. Salma, I just have to really quickly say my last international trip before COVID was to Riyadh. And I really enjoyed my trip there. That was my last trip. I think Anna said everything that I was gonna say, to be quite honest. When it comes to the groups that I work with, and I forgot to mention before, through our supply chain, we actually increase women's income 5 times their country's minimum wage. So we're giving them a living wage, and in most cases, for the very first time in their lives. And these are women who are in isolated rural communities, who haven't been formally educated. And so they have a really hard time getting access to opportunities and getting access to what we would consider traditional jobs. And over the last year and a half, so 18 months, I would say, as Salma mentioned before, we already knew that women around the world are in much tougher situations. And COVID-19, you know, I think the silver lining is that the areas and industries that are primarily women and, you know, made up of women and or minority communities, COVID shined a light on those industries, meaning that whether it's healthcare, you know, service providers, whether it's teachers, all of these industries that were really heavily impacted, and social, you know, services by COVID, women are the leaders. They're the ones in those jobs. And so I think that we can't get over COVID until we recognize that the social foundations that we all, you know, are a part of in our communities are women who are part of those. And in order for us to fully recover, we need to look at how we treat teachers and pay teachers. We need to look at how we train, you know, healthcare providers and how we compensate them as well. And so, you know, that's the silver lining, is that we can't get through this without actually making sure that we're incorporating and supporting and helping women, because we're the ones in those positions, we're the ones in those industries. Now, when it comes to developing a product and manufacturing, one of the huge challenges was supply chain that Anna mentioned. We're looking at taking raw materials, transforming them into a product, and then connecting that product to the marketplace. Throughout that entire supply chain, there was disruption. Everything from being able to source our packaging, you know, everything from being able to source other ingredients that we use. And then, of course, getting our products on shelf with our retail partners. And immediately I realized, because we were completely for a considerable amount of time cut off from our communities, I realized that we needed to not only support women when it came to making shea, but actually help them diversify what type of products that they make. So Anna said that one of their clients, you know, started making soap, right? So started making other products, and we recognize the same thing. In order for women in our communities to be able to overcome COVID, they needed to make products beyond just shea butter. And so investing in those, and not only in the beauty industry, but also looking at food products, also looking at home goods and things of that nature. So one clear takeaway was supporting them in diversifying the types of products that they make. The other thing is, we all know this, when it comes to sub-Saharan Africa, so many of the natural resources that are brought to market are typically brought in raw material form. We need investments in the creation of value-added products. People need to take their raw materials, whether it's in agriculture or whatever sector it is, and make it into a product that can be sold for higher value so that people's income and wages can increase. And so that's another area that I think is really important in terms of recommendations. And then, because we're in the ag sector, we have to consider climate change and how it disproportionately affects women of color, it disproportionately affects communities of color than other places in the world. And if we're going to truly overcome a lot of the issues that our community members are facing, we have to address some of the environmental issues. And that's part of the reason why I think it's so important that we're bringing products to market that are chemically free, that are plant-based, that are natural, and that it's using sustainable packaging. All of that is really critically important. And then, where is the money? We can't talk about helping and supporting SMEs without also looking at our ability to access capital, our ability to not only get microloans and microfinancing, but the growth capital that Anna was talking about earlier. And I think that we need to just simply change the way we look at financing women-owned businesses and SMEs. We don't have assets in certain things, and there are, you know, generational poverty that we're dealing with in a lot of the communities that we work with. And so they're not going to have access to certain things that are typically traditional in the financing world. And so not only do we need gender budgeting in policies, but we also need, financial institutions to really look at the access to capital issue in a way that changes slightly how individuals get access to capital and the opportunities people have to get the capital that they need to build and grow their businesses.
Rahama, fascinating. You're giving us a lot of food of thought. I should have told the organizers that we needed 2 hours, not 1 hour on the topic, but I love what you're saying, right? There were many challenges with COVID. Really interesting listening to the disruption of the supply chain. I love how you mentioned you're talking about diversity of skill sets for women, right? That's very, very interesting for us to think about. And the other nugget, you're consistent on this, the access to finance, and we'll talk more about it maybe in the next question, but it is not only having the capital available, as Anna and I have learned in what we have done with SheTrades, is also the training to the women so they know how to use the capital. But that's another thought. Marcela, tell me from your perspective, and then we'll move to Salma.
Thank you, Maria Luisa. I was delighted listening to the colleagues. I know you don't want me to mention more figures, but let me just, in this question, because of SMEs, to mention the Chilean reality. In the case of Chile, in 2020, only 1.6% of our SMEs exported. And also their destination markets are highly concentrated. In fact, in the same year, 62% of the Chilean SMEs exported to one single market and 51% exported a single product. So in this sense, our work from Subray, we are focusing promoting their internationalization, reducing the trade and regulatory barriers they face, improving their access to finance, as we are speaking, and strengthening their capacities in trade and in digital platforms, of course. We all know that the SME's participation in international trade has remained limited due to many reasons, such as high transaction costs, lack of knowledge and export processes, low levels of competitiveness, etc., as we all know here. But on top of that came COVID, and the figures that we manage in Chile, the Chilean Association of Entrepreneurs, show that 36.8% of our SMEs declare having lost more than 50% of their annual sales as a result of the crisis. Some of the challenges SMEs are facing are lack of liquidity due to low sales, followed by debts with financial institutions. Also, the reality in the Pacific Alliance with women-led export business is very similar, and it was shown in the IDB study that I mentioned earlier. But in regards to what the question, initiatives and opportunities to advance and move forward in these challenging times, for example, in Chile, there's an agency called Startup Chile that is a seed accelerator created by the Chilean government that has been in the forefront of these issues. And they have funding programs. We have been talking here about the importance of financing. The funding programs targeted at entrepreneurs in the different development stages. And they also have gender focus. As an example, in the pre-acceleration program called BUILD, at least 50% of the elected business must be led by women. Also, as we all know, the digital transformation is key in this recovery process. According to the Pacific Alliance survey that we did, COVID became a motivator for the digitalization of the companies. And as we can hear what the experience of Rahama in this. And because of this, one of the central lines of work of the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality in Chile has been promoting transformative actions that enable women and girls to play a leading role in this digital revolution. And in this context, Chile is one of the leaders, together with partners such as Finland and Microsoft and the Rockefeller Foundation, of the Generation Equality Action Coalition of Technology and Innovation. In addition, as chair of the Regional Conference of Women of the Latin America and the Caribbean, Chile launched a regional alliance for the digitalization of women, which will bring our nations together to tackle the challenge of reducing the digital gender gap that today keeps 4 out of 10 women from connecting into the internet in Latin America and the Caribbean. Within this framework, we will be launching a regional collaborative platform that is called in Spanish Todas Conectadas, that will offer a training on digital competencies for almost 4 million women in Latin America and the Caribbean, and also serve as networking and as marketplace for women entrepreneurs and women in the IT sector in the region. So I wanted to share with you this, because these are opportunities in these challenging times. Thank you.
Yeah. Marcela, I love it. I love it. And congratulations for leading those changes. And I think for all of us, as we move to Sam, I know I'm mindful of the time, but I don't want to miss this opportunity for all of us to remind ourselves, when we think that there's so much still to do and has not been done, to remember everything that we're doing and what has been done, because that empowers us, right? And gives us that faith that we can make it happen. My dear Salma, turn it over to you from your perspective on that.
Thank you, Maria Luisa, and I'll be very brief, because really pretty much a lot has been covered by my colleagues, and really going back to your point in the beginning, that we want to focus on opportunities, we want to focus on what's been working. And just going back to the beginning, at the beginning of the hour, when you asked why applying a gender lens, and picking up on what Rahama was saying, of that silver lining and the opportunities that do exist, because there is no other way of doing or building back better or towards an economic recovery if we don't really fully utilize women as there's so much potential for growth. They're an untapped resource in so many ways. So there's so much yet to be done, and their contribution, if we were to eradicate all discriminating policies, all of really empowering women, they will contribute to the global GDP. So it's good for everyone. And I think let's focus on what needs to be done. A lot has been already mentioned, and I join and echo what has been mentioned, whether it is ensuring equal rights of ownership of assets, removing barriers to financial inclusion for women, facilitating access to finance, the policy frameworks, and so on. There are a number of things that can be done to ensure that women really, whether it's public procurement, and that there are a lot of potentials of really utilizing women and activating women to build back better. And I really see that there is no other way of moving forward without that. And I'll stop in that, because really it's the only way forward. And there's a lot of opportunity, maybe for those who are listening in or attending. The big message here is there is an opportunity for investors, for public-private partnerships. Let's look at it not as a challenge or a problem that we need to fix, but really it's an opportunity for growth. And it's the only way forward is by inclusion and diversity.
Salma, thank you so much. That is wonderful. We only have 8 minutes left. And I know we did get one question about what can the WTO do, right? We are in the WTO Public Forum, in a venue where we are here, we're policymakers and decision makers. And I love what, Salma, I think what your message, right? There's an opportunity, there's a gender lens. From a UPS perspective, we have data, we have done studies, we care about small businesses. People sometimes look at us and say, well, you're a big business, why do you care about small businesses? But those are our customers, and we are constantly advocating for policies that help them be empowered. And the majority of women-owned businesses happen to be small and medium-sized businesses, or SMSEs, to use the language in Geneva. Last comments, and I know we had another question, but I think we're out of time. I'm going to call it my question of words of wisdom, combined with the question that we received: what can the WTO do? We have each 1 minute, so I'm going to go. Anna, you go first. Words of wisdom: what can the WTO do?
I think so here at the public forum, we are already discussing a lot of what other organizations, civil society, what all of us can do. And I think these are certain times to focus on what you could do and where you can affect change, right? And continue making the choice to challenge barriers to gender equality. If you're a man, if you're a woman, it doesn't matter. I do see that at the WTO and ITCA is playing a key role on that. We are having discussions around the Buenos Aires Declaration, around how to effectively implement policies that are mainstreaming gender. So I would recommend actually WTO members to continue and in this wave of promoting gender equality, of bringing these discussions inside and outside the WTO and looking outside for other organizations, private sector also to see what's going on. At ITC, we're very happy to bring the data and the reality of women entrepreneurs and their challenges and barriers to such discussions. So I acknowledge the important convening role that the WTO has, and I'm very excited for MC12 as well to see what they are going to bring to the table in terms of gender.
Thank you, Ana. Marcela?
Thank you. Well, I know we're conscious of time, so I'm going to be brief. You know that Chile has been a pioneer in including trade and gender chapters in our free trade agreements, and we have the biggest network of FTAs in the world. So we strongly believe that trade policy has a key role in this aim of women economic empowerment, and WTO is doing a great work in the informal working group on gender and trade that, as Ana just said, is working. There's already a work program in place towards MC11, and of course also in the longer term towards MC12. So my key message would be to all members to continue working and supporting the work of the informal working group on gender and trade to get to MC11 this year with a good substantive declaration for the empowerment of women of our countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcela. Thank you. My dear Rahama.
No, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. My final words and kind of words of advice, I do kind of want to touch really quickly on the gender question and the gender lens question, because we can't do any of this work if men aren't also at the table with us. And so I just want to make sure that we recognize that the way we define gender, yes, we focus primarily on women, but men have to be at the table as well. My words for those SMEs out there who are really trying to build back better, just don't give up, just keep going. You know, last year, I really thought I had to close my business. I really, for the very first time, after running this business for over 15 years, I thought I would have to shut my doors. And so I'm very fortunate that I'm still here. I'm still doing the work. And it's because of the partnerships that have come up over the last few months. And so UPS is one of those partners, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And in terms of what the WTO can do, I would say really lean in on women's issues and gender issues. Make it a priority, not just, you know, a footnote. Prioritize it, collect the data, become a data engine, and then be that facilitator. Bring the people in the room that need to be in the room. Bring women to the table who need to be at those tables. The women that I work with historically have always been considered, you know, excluded out of society, but I promise you they're more than capable to be their own solutions to their problems if given the opportunities and given the chance. Thank you.
I love it, Salma. Thank you so much, Rahama. My dear Salma.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief because really a lot has been said and a lot of words of wisdom, and I echo everything Rahama said. Mainstreaming gender equality across all, really applying a gender lens in all the policies, and also supporting what Marcela said, the informal working group. I think it's important to have an informal working group focusing on that, but also applying a gender lens all across. And congratulations, Rahama, on the great work you're doing, and congratulations on keeping your business floating. This has been a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my dear Salma. So for me, 2 minutes, and everyone, all that know me, that's a little time for a Latin woman, but I want to say thank you. Thank you to Marcela, Ana, Rahama, and Salma. You guys are, you ladies are amazing. Rahama and Salma, to your point about the gender lens, as a mother of 2 boys, I love your answer because I'm raising them to be amazing men that work with women side by side. And I think that's important for us not to forget, right? That we have to have that, it's inclusivity of everybody and working together. 1 minute left. We have policy papers, we have statistics, we have to look at technology, how to make it accessible, the finance, how to make it accessible, what is working that we can invest more and continue to work and do more, empowering. And then the last but not least that I think was consistent around partnership and community, right? That's something that we want our women entrepreneurs to know. They're not alone. They are part of a community. And I hope for the governments here at the WTO and the policymakers, they can see that piece and really leverage that partnership of working together with the private sector. With that, I'm a Star Wars fan. May the force be with all of you. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend. And thank you to the panelists.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Very
Bye.
much. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.